Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
LeBron said he was willing to take a pay cut, then he got the max. Also, we celebrate our nation's birthday with our attention turning to the diamond. And an all-time great Charger has never felt the energy around the team like it is with Jim Harbaugh. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
The LA Lakers are running it back with LeBron James getting a 2-year max contract. They also added to JJ Redick's staff with 2 veteran coaches. Andy Kamenetsky from Locked On Lakers joins me now. And Andy, we got the reports LeBron James was willing to take a pay cut if the Lakers were able to use the extra space to go get somebody, anybody, please. They weren't. And so LeBron is, according to reports, getting a 2-year, something close to a max, if not the max. As this story unfolded, and now that we're seeing some sort of conclusion, what is your reaction to the last couple of days in how the LeBron turns?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think it's important to note it wasn't get somebody, anybody. It seemed like a very specific list of players that he would be willing to do that for. And I think that's important to note just because it created a very specific, fairly narrow lane for Rob Pelinka to get something done. Like, I mean, one of the players that it was reported that was on the list was James Harden. Like, it would have required James Harden to take like a $50 million pay cut in order to do this compared to what he got for the Clippers. So, I mean, I don't think Rob Pelinka is, the second coming of Jerry West necessarily, but I don't think that's fair to put on him. Klay Thompson, they reportedly offered, we're trying to get a 4-year, $80 million deal going with a sign and trade with Golden State, which, putting aside the fact Golden State didn't seem to be cooperative partners, ultimately Klay Thompson decided to go to Dallas instead. They can put out the offer. They can't do anything beyond that. They'd been talking with DeMar DeRozan, but it seemed like DeMar wanted more than a mid-level amount of money. So then you really start getting into more complications for a sign and trade. And to be perfectly honest, I wouldn't want 3 years of DeMar DeRozan at his age, between $15 to $20 million. I don't think that's actually a very good idea for the Lakers, especially giving up assets on top of it. And the reason I even mention all this is, as much as I think LeBron was sincere in having Rich Paul put out this willingness to, take less money if Rob Pelinka could bring in these guys requiring a mid-level exception, I also think there was an element of preemptively getting ahead of, old man LeBron getting a max deal, pushing 40. And it's like, hey, look, I offered an opportunity, man. Yeah. Like, I can't help it they didn't figure this out because, and I'm not saying LeBron was obligated to make this an open-ended offer for a mid-level exception for anybody, but that would have offered more flexibility. Ultimately, I think the Lakers are just in a difficult position right now. They don't have much cap flexibility. They don't have a ton of tradable assets. And, they have 2 players who make like about $100 million together. That is a difficult place to operate.
Yeah, it would not be surprising if LeBron understood, having been in the league 20 years, the cynicism of fans and media and going, okay, LeBron gets the max. But we also understand that there is a PR part of this. And so I think the cynical fans are going to be cynical no matter what. Let's talk about the coaching side of this, because Scott Brooks and Nate McMillan, that's no small potatoes joining JJ Redick's staff. We saw Joe Mazzulla, the difference from last year to this past season in coaching in Boston, understanding, okay, Drew Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis, they make a difference too. But Joe Mazzulla clearly wanted a more experienced staff around him, JJ Redick being a first-time head coach. Now he gets 2 guys who have been through plenty of playoff battles, even if they haven't had, the same level of success as you'd want at the highest level. What do they give, JJ?
In the case of Nate McMillan, I think he brings a lot of defensive acumen. He's known as a defensive specialist. And in Scott Brooks, he's coached in the finals. I've always gotten the impression that he is very good in player relationships. I always look at the fact that he had a very good relationship with Russell Westbrook, who is not the easiest guy in the world to coach. And I think that speaks to that ability. I also imagine, and I'm trying to dig more into McMillan and Brooks because it's been a long time since I was seeing either one of their work on a regular basis. And in reaching out, the feedback I'm getting on them is fairly mixed, to be honest. But I imagine just their experience in helping JJ Redick go through the process of translating what's in his mind, the vision that he has on both sides of the ball. How do you go about translating that and implementing that on the court where, it's not just inside your head. It's not just in a whiteboard. It's not just you and LeBron talking on a podcast. It's how do I communicate all of this and turn it into action? And I think just having those guys there, even if, in the case of Nate McMillan in particular, probably not as modern a coach as you'd prefer in 2024, just that overall breadth of experience, I think is going to be very, very useful for Redick.
Stay up to date all year on the LA Lakers by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Lakers on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Sports Today your first listen. Coming up, we turn our attention to America's pastime on the 4th of July. Before we get to that, the MLB All-Star starters have been announced. Game Time makes getting to the ballpark even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute deals. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the free app and new users can get $20 off their first purchase with code Locked On. Terms apply. That's code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed. If you're catching this episode after hearing your favorite Locked On show, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. The Philadelphia Phillies are sending 3 infielders to the MLB All-Star Game later this month. Bryce Harper, Trey Turner, and Alec Bohm were among the starters named to the Midsummer Classic on Wednesday evening. Joining the Phillies are Brewers catcher William Contreras and outfielder Christian Yelich, Padres outfielder Jurickson Profar and Fernando Tatis Jr., D-back second baseman Ketel Marte, and Dodgers DH Shohei Ohtani. The American League has 4 teams with 2 starters each. The Astros have second baseman Jose Altuve and DH Yordan Alvarez. The Yankees will see outfielders Aaron Judge and Juan Soto start. The Orioles have catcher Adley Rutschman and shortstop Gunnar Henderson starting. And the Guardians' third baseman Jose Ramirez and outfielder Stephen Kwan will join Blue Jays first baseman Vlad Guerrero Jr. to begin the All-Star Game. Free agent Alec Burks has agreed to a 1-year deal with the Miami Heat, acquired by the New York Knicks from the Detroit Pistons in a deadline deal last season to shore up their backcourt depth. Burks averaged 6.5 points in just 13.5 minutes to end the regular season with New York. After OG Anunoby's injury in the Eastern Conference semifinal series against the Indiana Pacers, though, Burks got extra playing time and exploded. Nearly 18 points on 51% shooting across 5 games in that series. He is supposed to be a microwave scorer off the bench for Miami. And on the diamond, the Yankees slide continues as the Cincinnati Reds came into the Bronx and stole a series.
The Yankees lose. What's up? This is Jeff Carr from the Locked On Reds podcast. And the Cincinnati Reds go into the Bronx and take 2 out of 3. At the very least, they've got a chance for a series sweep of the New York Yankees here on Independence Day. That's right. Andrew Abbott pitched a gem. He ended up with a couple of walks that he shouldn't have because the home plate umpire was just not calling correctly. I don't know what his strike zone was, but Andrew Abbott pitched around that, did well. You had Fernando Cruz get into trouble, get out of trouble. The Reds turned two, not one, but two double plays late in the game to shut down Yankee rallies, including in the ninth inning with Juan Soto on deck. You had a guy on first, and you got Anthony Volpe to hit into a ground into a double play. That was fantastic. Noelvi Marte with a home run, and the Reds get another one-run win. You absolutely love to see it.
Joining me now, our pal from Locked On MLB, it is Sully. And Sully, this is a baseball season right now that feels like it is the Philadelphia Phillies season to do with what they please right now. Is that oversimplifying it?
Maybe a little bit, but I picked them to win the World Series at the beginning of the year, and even with
I remember I bet on it because you did that.
Yeah,
I feel pretty good about that.
And even with the current injuries that they have, they're not really showing any signs of slowing down. In fact, some of those injuries may give them a break or two. I mean, give some of their players a break or two. I mean, right now I would be. But here's the deal. I'd be stunned if they didn't, but the last couple of years I would have been stunned if the Braves and the Dodgers didn't do it. Right. And both times, neither of those teams could get out of their own way. So, a lot of it could be who makes it in through the wild card. But I really love this Philadelphia Phillies team, and especially if Harper and everyone could be healthy and they can get a new center fielder. I mean, they have a hole or two to fill, but come the trade deadline, if they pick up an outfielder, they're going to have a great amount of depth. And I think they should pick up a spare arm or two because they never hurt. But I love this Phillies team. I think they're built to win in the postseason. And I think they're just a little bit better than the Dodgers and a little bit better than the Brewers. Although I do like what the Brewers are doing, which is...
I was going to ask you about that.
I talked about that in today's episode. I like the fact that they're throwing a lot of spaghetti at the wall and saying, hey, we don't need Dallas Keuchel for a full season. Just give us a handful of starts. Savali, just be okay the second half of the year. Just try a bunch of things. It shows me at least they're being proactive. I mean, I would love to see them go for Flaherty on Detroit. I think he would be a great fit for them. But they desperately need a starting pitcher to give them some starting pitching depth. But I like that they're being proactive in a year where they lost their, you know who they could really get? If the Brewers could work out a deal for Corbin Burns, he would really, really help this team.
I knew where that was headed. But here's the thing. I think here's the question that even Brewers fans want answered. Is it going like in the regular season? They have been a regular season team a couple times in the last few years. And then in the postseason, they run into these squads that have the star power. The Brewers are kind of trying to ham and egg it. Do you think it's going to translate? That's
not always been the case, though. They lost to Atlanta in 2021 where they didn't have Acuna. They didn't have many of their star players on that team. I thought the Brewers were going to win the pennant that year because I thought the Dodgers and Giants were going to cancel each other out. And I thought the Brewers were going to make quick work of Atlanta. It turned out to be the exact opposite. But they didn't. That was not a star-studded Braves team. We got to pump the brakes a tiny bit. And it wasn't like they faced a Arizona Diamondbacks team last year that, yes, they did win the pennant, but let's not act like they were the 1998 Yankees. They have lost to teams that have been, ham and eggers themselves.
That's true.
So they have to out ham and egg the ham and eggers. Now
I'm just hungry, Sully. I
know.
This is a bad place to be. You mentioned the Yankees, and we can't do a baseball segment and not talk about them. But the good news for us is they're actually quite a good team. We don't have to just pretend to find reasons to talk about them. The problem is, over the last 10 games or so, they have not been a really good team, though Aaron Judge continues to do Aaron Judge things. What do you make of where the Yankees stand right now?
Oh, it's the easiest diagnosis in the world. They've had some great pitching performances the first half of the season by Heel, by Rondon, by a couple other pitchers who came out of nowhere to give them some depth when Cole was absent. The nanosecond Cole showed back up, they all turned back into pumpkins. And, you know, and they're doing it with Judge having an MVP caliber season. Yeah. Soto realizing that as a free agent, he can ask for all the money in the world. And Scott Boras thinking, oh, you thought I've lost my touch? There's a better chance that they'll reanimate Lou Gehrig and sign him to a long-term deal than sign Juan Soto to a long-term deal because – Boras is drooling, but it's down to the starting pitching. The starting pitching was surprisingly good the first quarter of the season, but the second quarter of the season, it's fallen apart. And you've seen they've dropped 7 of their last 10 games, and Baltimore's not exactly been playing like world beaters, but they've been able to leapfrog them. And I think that's what's happening with the Yankees. They're going to live and die by their starting pitching. If their starting pitching is in the condition they're in right now in October, then it will be what we call a typical Aaron Boone October for the Yankees, which is without a pennant.
Stay up to date all year on the major leagues by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On MLB on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Coming up, the vibes are immaculate around the Chargers. Just ask a Chargers legend. Jim Harbaugh has brought energy to the Chargers. All electricity puns aside, and I have a lot. I have a book. Do you want to see that? Anyway, the feeling from inside the locker room is awesome, as Sean Merriman tells our Locked On Chargers hosts.
I walked in the building, man, and it was like this energy when you talk to everybody. It was like this array of confidence that I haven't seen maybe since I left, off of the teams that I played with. And I'm talking about everyone from the coordinators to the equipment guys, Chris and those guys who's been there since I was there. There's a different level of confidence in that building, man. And I feel like those guys are. I feel like they're moving with a purpose, right? Like you talk to them, everybody's locked in. They want to go work out. They want to go watch them. They go into it. It is a different feeling in that building. So I'm not coming out and saying, screaming Super Bowl, screaming playoffs or anything like that. I just know this. They're probably going to be the last team you want to come out and play this year because of the physicality and the mindset and what's being built in there. And I think that the Chargers fans in general, regardless of what happens, like record-wise, they're going to be better. I know they're going to be a better team, better record. I don't know how much better. But coming into this season, they got every bit of a reason to be excited for what's about to happen. And I've seen it firsthand. And I'm not saying that the hype of Jim Harbaugh and big name. I'm talking about just that looking in the eyes of those coordinators and those players that's in there and that level of focus and that they have. I haven't seen that since I left playing with the teams I played for.
Vibes are great. We love vibes. Positive vibes always here on Locked On Sports Today. But you can't win on vibes. This is just not a very good roster. It is Justin Herbert and a lot of guys that you've never heard of, or a lot of guys who have not proven it in the NFL, or a lot of guys who used to be really awesome and are significantly less awesome than they once were. It's just not a very talented team. So the vibes can be great. You're building something. You bring in a new coach. You change the culture. The vibes around Brandon Staley were awful. That was clear. You give up 60. Like, it's going to be bad. And it's been changed. But remember also, Jim Harbaugh burned out in San Francisco. He didn't burn out at Michigan. It's a little bit different. But this is the NFL again. This is a different thing. Talk to me in a year, in 2 years, in 3 years. And we'll see how the vibes are then. And finally, Jonathan Owens is getting some time away from Chicago Bears training camp this year. The Bears are granting him permission to travel to the Olympics to cheer on his wife. Maybe you've heard of her, Simone Biles. Now, some people have made the joke. Yeah, well, it's a journeyman safety. Of course, the Bears are going to let him go to training camp. It's not that big a deal. But I'm sorry, Jonathan Owens didn't hear you over the fact that he's married to the greatest gymnast of all time, arguably the greatest athlete of all time. So you make your jokes. I think he's winning on this one. If you're catching this episode after hearing your favorite Locked On show, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Also, if you're a new subscriber to Locked On Sports Today, we're here for you with the biggest stories in sports every day. Coming up on the next Locked On Sports Today, who will be the biggest name moved at the Major League Baseball trade deadline? So at least until tomorrow, stay locked on sports today.
Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
For more episodes of Locked On Sports Today, go to our video on demand. Click on Sports at the top of your screen. There, you'll find past episodes of Locked On Sports Today, plus other Locked On shows on demand.